Welcome to the Empowerment Hour, a podcast dedicated to the woman ready to take charge of her life, live in her purpose, and be unapologetically authentic. I am your host, Nancy Ruffin, award-winning author, mommypreneur, and the self-proclaimed Latina Oprah who is dedicated to helping women unleash their power, discover their purpose, and live up to their fullest potential. My goal is to empower you, inspire you, and help you unlock your passions and discover your purpose so that you live the most fulfilled and impassioned life. If you're ready to make a change and start living on purpose, then you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hey. Welcome back to another episode of the Empowerment Hour podcast. It's your girl, Nancy Ruffin, and I'm so happy to be back with you guys this week. I am coming off of a very restful weekend. I had an amazing Thanksgiving. I hope you all did too. I actually hosted Thanksgiving this year at my house, and I've actually been hosting it for the past 5 years, and it's always such a great night because my parents come over, my in-laws come over. This year we had my husband's aunt join us, and then later on in the evening my sister and her family came over, and it was just a beautiful night of being amongst the people I love most. Also, being able to express my gratitude just for life, just for the simple things we tend to take for granted, like the gift of family. There's so many people during these holiday seasons who don't have family, and just these things that we assume everyone has. So I hope you all had an amazing Thanksgiving spent with the people that you loved. I hope that you enjoyed all of the food and the beverages and the desserts, and just being in communion with those people who are closest and dearest to you. And I know for me, I am super grateful and thankful for you. Thank you for rocking with me for what is almost going to be another year. I started this podcast, I think maybe it was going on 2 years. And since then, we have steadily increased in our listenership. You guys are very engaging. You are constantly leaving me messages and dropping me notes and commenting on our Instagram page. So thank you for all of that, because I know there are dozens of podcasts out there, and the fact that you all have made the Empowerment Hour one of your favorites and one of the podcasts that you all listen to regularly, it means a lot. It means a lot to me, and it's because of you that I'm here every week and I'm doing these episodes, even though today I was feeling a little bit under the weather, but I got up, I sucked it up, and so here I am. Now this week, I kind of wanted to elaborate on last week's podcast, which was about self-awareness and the importance of, investing in yourself and acknowledging all of our shit and accepting who we are, but also being wise enough to work on those things that need to be changed, or those things that don't make us better people, right? We're constantly changing and growing and evolving. And the idea is that we're continuously growing. And as we learn more about ourselves and the things that drive our decisions and our behaviors, that we can move forward and make the necessary changes so that we can start changing the outcomes of our decisions, right? They say that if you want a different outcome, you have to make a different choice. And before you can do that, you really have to understand where those choices are stemming from and what in your past is leading you to make the same types of choices over and over and over again. So this week, to add to that conversation, I wanted to talk about personal accountability and the responsibility that we have to ourselves to live our best life. And when I talk about personal accountability, I mean, that means taking ownership of all of your shit, the good, the bad, the ugly, letting go of the victim mentality, this idea that things are continuously happening to us as if, the universe is conspiring against us. You have to let that shit go. You have to stop playing the victim and allowing yourself to believe that others are responsible for where you are in your life. I think that many of us, or not many, but I think that some of us tend to sit in that space because it's what we're familiar with, it's what's easy, and it allows us to shift the blame from ourselves onto other people. And this is something that I was discussing, I think last week with two friends of mine. They called me because they needed advice on how to proceed in a new business endeavor that they are embarking on. And it's a partnership. And unfortunately, the partnership that was supposed to entail a number of individuals at its inception, once the team started meeting and started really digging into the business's mission, they started to see that their visions were not aligned. And what was becoming transparent during their process was that one individual was asserting themselves more as the leader instead of falling back and allowing it to be a true partnership where all individuals' ideas were being heard and respected. This one person was basically knocking down the ideas of the others and failing to accept, their input. And so my girlfriend, called me and she wanted to get my advice on what she should do. And I pretty much said to her, I was like, you have to do what you feel is right in your gut. Because our guts, our instincts, they never steer us wrong. If you're getting a bad vibe about someone or something, then you have to listen to it because that is your spirit. That is the universe telling you, run and get the hell out of there quick, fast before you live to regret it. And so that's what I told her. I said, I think that it's important for you, if you guys are feeling a certain type of way, pay attention to that. Pay attention to what's coming up for you. Don't ignore it. Don't think it's going to get better because this person is showing you who they are at the onset. And so what happened was they decided to move forward in the partnership without this other individual. And I believe then the individual was starting to throw shade or placing blame on them for not wanting to continue with the partnership, but it was a result of how she was coming into the partnership. And so when I say that you have to take accountability for your actions, that is also understanding who you are. And although this may have been a business endeavor that this other individual was really passionate about and really wanted to be involved with, the way she was communicating that passion made it appear as if she was not a team player. And so she has to own that. She has to look at herself and figure out how she can, in the future, better work on being a team player. And not saying maybe she would have been a great team player, but her delivery and the way she was communicating with the team was not very team-like. And so I share that because a lot of times when we find ourselves in shitty situations or in less than ideal relationships, or our friendships fail, or we get fired from our job, all of that is stemming from who we are at our core and how we engage with people, how we communicate our desires and our thoughts and all of these things. And to sit and place blame or to act as if everything or all of these bad things are happening to you is unfair to yourself and also to those who you're shifting this or projecting this blame onto. Because at the end of the day, we're all responsible for our choices, right? So where we are at this very point in our lives is a direct result of choices that we made. So if you got fired from your job, then take a step back and instead of saying, oh, they just didn't like me or my boss is an asshole, really think about how you contributed to your own firing, right? Because employers and bosses are not firing their great employees. So look at yourself. Take a good, long, hard look at yourself and ask yourself, what were you not doing? Or what were you doing that caused you to get fired? The same thing goes for, relationships. If you find yourself in a relationship where you're being mistreated, where you're constantly unappreciated, where you're being disrespected, ask yourself, why have you allowed that to go on for so long? Right? Because we teach people how to treat us by what we allow and what we accept. So the first time they disrespected you, what did you do about that? The first time they mistreated you, what did you do about that? If you're in a situation where you're constantly being cheated on, why did you let that shit slide the first time? You feel me? It's a pattern. So if you allow people to treat you a certain way, they are going to think that it's okay. So now when you're getting dogged out, when you're being disrespected, when you're being violated, you can't sit there and cry. Well, you can because it's hurtful, but you have to also be willing to acknowledge that you have allowed that to happen in your life. You have not set boundaries. You have not, laid that stake on the ground or that line and said to say, you cannot cross this line, because if you cross this line, this is what's going to happen. Right? It's almost like with children, you can constantly tell them, don't do something, don't put your hand on the stove, don't touch, the fire. And until they get burned, they're not going to understand. So if you continue to allow someone to mistreat you, that is exactly what they are going to do. But if you put a stop to that shit from the very beginning, then they know not to fuck with you. Now they know what your boundaries are. They know what that line is, and they know not to cross it. And I talk about this because in my own personal experiences, I've had to take accountability for my own shit. There was a time where I felt that, things were happening to me when I wasn't able to conceive when I wanted to. I was bitter and I was angry, and I just hated the world. I hated women who were pregnant. I hated mothers. I mean, I was in a really ugly space. And until I allowed myself to really sit with myself and identify where that was coming from, I was getting the same outcomes, right? And once I decided to really do the work and really take a step back and look at myself and realize that my life and where I was at that point was a direct result of all of my choices, of the things that I did and did not do, that was when shit started to change for me, because I had a mindset shift happen. And I literally told myself, this is not going to be your life anymore. You're not going to sit here. You're not going to feel sorry for yourself. You're not going to blame others for your inability to conceive. You are going to do your research. You're going to figure out what the fuck needs to be done, and you're going to do it. And that was exactly what I did. And I will tell you guys that the minute I decided to take control of my own life was the minute that my life started to change. The minute I started taking responsibility for my own happiness, that is when I started to manifest happiness into my life. So this thing, when I see people sit in their own shit and blame everybody and their mother for where they are in their life, it's just ridiculous to me. I don't even have time to entertain that, because no one is responsible for your life except for yourself. And the sooner you realize that, the sooner you understand that, the quicker your life will begin to change. You can't believe that everything that has happened to you is because someone has done it to you. And yes, maybe someone has done something to you, but how you react to that act makes all the difference. You control your actions. So people can do whatever the fuck they want to you, but then it's up to you to decide what you are going to do moving forward. Okay, so to sit and blame your boyfriend or blame your parents or blame your friends or blame whoever for where you are or where you aren't in your life is a waste of time. Imagine if you took all of that energy that you were putting into blaming others and turned it onto yourself and focused on why you're at this juncture in your life, and think about the decisions and the behaviors and the choices that have resulted to you being where you are. You would be so much more happier, because you would be able to start picking at all of that shit and really start working on changing your life. The new year is coming. I do a lot of work with goal setting and vision boards and visioning. And I know that for some, it might be nonsense. But the thing is, until you have a clear idea about what you want your life to look like, until you have a clear action plan of how you are going to make those things happen, you're just wasting your time. You're wasting time that can be spent on really changing your life. You have to be clear on who you are and what you want, and you have to be clear on who you're not and what you don't want. Because sometimes you may not know what you want, but all of us know what we don't want. So sometimes that's the first step. Understanding what you don't want and then taking the necessary actions to make sure that those things don't happen to you. You know, we look at the beginning of a new year as an opportunity to start new and start fresh. But who the heck wants to wait an entire year to start fresh? Every single day is a new opportunity for you to own your shit, take accountability, and start new. Every single day, every morning when you awake and you open your eyes and you take that breath, that is another opportunity for you to say to yourself, today is the day that I'm going to change my life. And you may not know at that moment how that's going to happen, but acknowledging it, verbalizing it, putting it out there is the first step. And once you do that, get clear on the shit you don't want, right? So maybe you don't want to be a procrastinator anymore. So you know what you do? The next time you have to do something and you find yourself saying, oh, I'll do it later, catch yourself in that moment and tell yourself, no, I'm going to do this now. It's all about making different choices. It's all about being accountable, understanding who you are, what motivates you, what inspires you, what you're passionate about, what you love, all of these things. You have a responsibility to yourself to live your best life. And what that means is you have to make decisions based on what makes you happy, not what makes others happy, not what your parents want you to do, not what your siblings want you to do, not what your spouse or partner or children or any of that. Because at the end of the day, they all go on to live their own lives. Okay? You have to live yours. You have to live in your skin day in and day out. So why wouldn't you want to be happy? You know, sometimes I've found I've lost a lot of relationships in my life. Friendships, work relationships, personal relationships. And what I've learned in those losses, for some of them, they have required me to take a long, hard look at myself and made me accountable for my responsibility in the demise of the friendship. And I'm thinking very specifically right now about someone who I met. I might have been 17 years old when I met her. She was the girlfriend of my then best friend. And they had been dating for, 6 months or so. Not a long time, but he ended up getting locked up and she ended up getting pregnant by him. And she came from a very religious home. Her mother was, I think Pentecostal, and being an unwed, pregnant teenager, because I think she was 18 at the time, was frowned upon, and she was living with him. And when he got locked up, she had nowhere to go. And, my family, we took her in, and she stayed with us for a while until she was able to reconcile with her mom. And then she went back home. But she was one of my closest friends. I mean, we did everything together. We had some really great times. And then I want to say maybe 2007, because I'm trying to remember. I remember I was working at HMO, and because my stupid ass, I was talking about her with another friend, and not talking about her in a way. I mean, but regardless, I'm not gonna make excuses. I was talking about her, but it wasn't anything that I had not communicated to her directly. I was just talking to another friend about it, and part of the conversation was that at that time she had gotten pregnant again. She was pregnant with a second child from the new man that she was with, and he was a really good guy. Had his head together, was employed, he was a really good guy. And so I remember telling my other girlfriend in an email how she had trapped him, by getting pregnant. And stupid old me, instead of sending it to the girlfriend who I thought I was talking about, I sent it to the girl I was talking about. so, so needless to say, she was very hurt by it, and that in essence ended our friendship. And it was, I mean, at the time, it was a hard loss because we were friends for such a long time. I mean, I was there for the birth of her daughter. The little girl was like my niece, and I saw her grow up, and she would spend weekends at my house. And so it was really difficult when she ended the friendship. But, in hindsight, I realized you shouldn't be talking about your friends, regardless of whether it was stuff that I had discussed with her, face to face. The fact was I shouldn't have been talking about her behind her back with someone else. And I mourn the loss, and in hindsight, it probably was for the best, because I do believe that not everyone that comes into our lives is meant to stay in our lives for the long haul. And I think that at that time, I was meant to be a part of her life to help her, shift through that trying time, being newly pregnant, helping her reconcile with her mom, her boyfriend being locked up. I mean, all of these things, right? God sets things in motions that we don't understand when they're happening. And it's only in hindsight when we can look back and assess and realize, okay, she wasn't meant to be a lifelong friend. We were meant to be friends for that moment in time, for each of us, to get whatever we needed to get from one another and move forward. And so I share that to say that, I'm not immune to this. I'm human, and there's things that I've done in my past that in hindsight, I probably maybe would do differently. Not sure how much though, because I do know that everything that I have done has led me to this exact point in my life right now, and I wouldn't change any of it, none of it. But it's a great teacher, right? So even though I wouldn't change any of it, I can use those experiences for the future and moving forward, and making sure that I respect my friendships more now. Understanding that talking about your friend is not cool, and all of that comes from, you're just young and you're stupid, and you don't realize how your actions can affect another person. And so, yeah, I'm not going to blame her for ending the friendship. I'm going to blame myself, and I'm going to be accountable for the fact that that friendship ended, and it was because of something that I did. And so I could have just sat here and defended myself and said, oh, well, these are all things I've said to you before. But that's not the point. The point is you have to be accountable for your own shit. And it's not always in your best interest to play the victim card, because as long as you play victim, you will continue to be a victim. And who wants to live their life that way, right? You want to be a victor. You want to live an amazing life. You want to be happy, joyful. You want to be at peace, and you want to attract all of these things to you. And the way you attract that is by living that, by affirming it. Because if what you're affirming is that you're a victim and things continue to happen to you, that is what you're going to attract into your life. So I want to leave you with that thought tonight. I want you to take this podcast and everything that I've said and apply it to your life, and think about how you are attracting certain things into your life. And if they're things that are not productive to you, then think about how you can start to change that. Okay, so with that, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Empowerment Hour podcast. Make sure that you go on iTunes, kindly leave a review if you haven't already done so. Subscribe so that you can be made aware every Monday when a new episode drops. And make sure you're connecting with me on my social media. Until next time, mi gente, have a wonderful week and go out there and crush some goals.